Everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. And I appreciate the opportunity to sponsor what is sure to be a very informative session. Again, Dennis Lyon. I'm the Regional Director of Business Development for Oregon. Next month will mark 5 years that I've been with HomeServe and that I've been working with Oregon cities. In that time, we've gone from 2 Oregon partners to 23. Tillamook just approved our program for their community earlier this week. We're currently working with cities such as Cottage Grove, Hermiston, Ashland, Coos Bay, and Hines, along with several others. And just to kind of give you a general overview of what we do, the NLC Service Line Program helps residents understand what their lateral line responsibilities are before they have an unexpected issue and allows them to choose how they wish to prepare for these potentially expensive incidents. Our program increases the quality of life in the community by helping residents when they need it the most, while also reducing the number of distress calls made to the city. We are the only program of our kind that's endorsed by the National League of Cities as well as the League of Oregon Cities. There is no cost to your city. We administer every aspect of the program, including marketing, billing, claims, customer service, local contractor network, and so on. We educate homeowners about those lateral line responsibilities and also provide them voluntary protection that provides up to $8,500 per occurrence for external water and or sewer line issues like broken, cracked, leaking pipes, clogs, tree roots, and so on. There are no service fees or deductibles or annual or lifetime limits in our coverage. And when homeowners that are customers have issues, instead of calling the city, they call our call center in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is staffed by live agents all day, every day, including holidays. Program includes an optional revenue share that can be used for city initiatives. And all repairs are performed to code by local licensed and vetted contractors. And we pay those contractors directly for the services performed once the job's completed. The last 3 years in Oregon, we have paid over $750,000 in claims. My contact information will be displayed on the screen, and I would encourage you to reach out to me to find out more information or schedule a time so that we can have a conversation about the specifics of what we do and how we do it. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you all have yourselves a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, Dennis. I also dropped your stuff into the chat as well, so folks can find your contact there as well. Now we will transition over to Scott Winkles to introduce our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Scott Winkles. I've been the public safety and human resources lobbyist for going on 15 years now. And I will say that in the last session, I would say it was the one of the most rewarding and sometimes challenging, and certainly both intellectually and in a number of different ways, to undertake the task of police reform on behalf of you, our members. And I would like to say that, this is not something that we started this session. The League of Oregon Cities has been dropping legislation and amendments into bills for at least going back to my time responsible for this portfolio. But this was the session when, because of the murder of George Floyd and a number of other factors, and also having a outstanding group of legislators who were willing to take this issue on all at the same time, progress was made. And as we were discussing, our group was discussing in our green room earlier, that this was a team effort. And it is profoundly significant in my mind that the bill packages that we'll be talking about today were largely consensus driven, with people from all over the spectrum agreeing on these. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our speakers. First, we'll be hearing from Senator Lou Frederick. Lou has been a senator, has been in the legislature going back to 2000 and elected in 2008. You're muted, sir.
2009 is when I was appointed.
2009. That I do remember those.
And
it does blend together after a while for me.
We have a regular thing here now, just so that you know, our cup, so that.
And started in the House, moved to the Senate, moved over to the Senate, and has been a champion on these issues, and a good friend of the league for his entire tenure with the league at the legislature. Next is Representative Noble. Representative Noble also comes as former chief of police for the city of McMinnville prior to being elected to the legislature, and he has the hands-on and frontline experience of dealing with these issues, both in the legislative and as a manager. And next we have Director Granderson, Director of the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. For those of you who might be new to city leadership, DPPST is not just the police academy, it is the accrediting licensing agency for public safety professionals. And in that capacity not only oversees the training of our law enforcement officers, but the process in which that determines whether or not they have continued to earn the privilege of holding that certification. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Lou to begin his remarks.
Well, thank you, Scott, and I want to echo what you had to say. This is an effort that was both long in coming, but also really a real comprehensive effort on the part of the legislature to make some changes. There are probably 12 major bills that passed that will affect some of the things that the League of Oregon Cities folks are dealing with. But let's be real clear. The basic concept behind the bills is that we want to see public safety, and that's the key element everywhere. It's not a matter of it's not exactly completely a racial situation or an economic situation. It is let's make sure that people are feeling safe. A number of us came into this effort because of personal situations, personal encounters that were not pleasant. Let's put it that way. There were a number. I always talk about the fact that I'm stopped once. Well, now that I have gray hair, less frequently, but I was stopped once a year in my own neighborhood, and I live in northeast Portland near the Lloyd Center. But I was stopped at least once a year for all sorts of strange reasons officially. One of them was my favorite was you're driving pretty slowly through the neighborhood. Why is that? When I had to explain to him that it was my neighborhood, that was a surprise because my neighborhood has been gentrified quite a bit. So that's one of the things. But I also had a weapon, a gun pulled on me by a police officer in King City when I was a television reporter back in the 1990s. So I've had some personal experiences that have not been particularly good, and we wanted to try to make it clear that what we wanted to see as public safety was an issue of people being guardians, not warriors. There's a significant philosophical difference between the two, and that is something that we're continuing to work on. So you have bills that specifically dealt with some of the issues surrounding the murder of George Floyd, but you also have much larger things. Regarding George Floyd, we have issues regarding training in cardiopulmonary circulation anatomy. I mean, that was a bill that we passed because people needed to know what was going on. But also the issues related to police munitions and dealing with police accountability. And I think that's probably the key element there. Police accountability. People would like to see if something is done poorly or wrong, people would like to see that made clear, and that there are consequences that are clear, and that we can track those things. So many of the bills, 22 is, by the way, just so that you know that we actually passed related to police accountability. But many of the bills are based around the idea that we need to be able to track and keep a record of what's going on, and that's going to be helped by the DPSST. But the other aspect is the recruitment. Who comes into the police force? One of the issues that we that I've talked about for some time is the idea that when you ask someone why they want to be a police officer, if their primary reason is to catch the bad guys, then they're going to start only looking for bad guys. They're not going to have a sense of what the community is about. And that's an issue that we want to see. We want to see people who want to protect and serve. That's the mission that I see. And I think that that's the mission that came across very well in the legislature. So if you look at some of the bills that we looked at, we wanted to try to make sure that people began to be connected, more connected with their communities than in many cases they are. I live in Portland. I've been in Portland since '74 and have had, a number of different interactions. But I was also a television reporter for 17 years, and I watched things take place around that. I watched the various philosophies come through: community policing, the broken window philosophy, all of these kinds of things. I watched as over the few years here. But it's one of those things that we were able to get a number of things accomplished in the legislature by way of the help with Representative Noble and other folks who were part of the mission to make Oregon safer and to make people feel as though it was predictable how they would be treated and that they would be treated well. So especially in concerns when there are serious issues taking place. So that's what we looked at. There are lots of other things that relate to this that the cities are dealing with. Obviously, the houseless and homeless situation is one of them. The healthcare situation, education, all of these things are part of what we have to deal with. But when it comes to the concerns regarding public safety, we were able to make a pretty good run at changing some of the philosophy. It's going to take a while, but changing some of the issues that we were dealing with as a result of really looking at a reset following the murder of George Floyd. So that's my basic sort of concept. I unfortunately can talk too long on this, so I will pass it along to Representative Noble.
Thank you, Senator, and Scott and everybody for inviting me. I just want to say real quickly, when I got to the legislature 5 years ago now, it was quickly identified people who were thoughtful and made an impact. And Lou Frederick serves this state very well. And I am always honored to be able to join him in legislation and to make our state better. My view of what we've been going through for the last year and a half, I started off when we heard of the tragedy of George Floyd. And I have to tell you that we seem to have a tragedy about every 5 years. And when I was talking to one of my friends, we did a podcast, an African-American gentleman has been a friend of mine for 40 years in Portland. And we did a podcast together. And we had actually taught and were guest speakers at Linfield College after Brown's fatal incident as well 5 years ago in his wife's or a friend of ours he was a professor at Linfield. And Fred is a African-American who grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's been a friend for 40 years. And I'm the white rural cop. And this narrative seems to play out over and over. So when we had the opportunity, and now I was in the legislature and working on the joint committee during the interim last year, and then with the work in the Senate and the House, it was really apparent to me that we needed to make a change. And I believe what we're talking about really are getting the right people into the job. And we're talking about character. I believe I can teach someone how to be a police officer. At least I used to be able to. I've been out for a while now. That is now Director Granderson's job. But I can't teach character. I can't teach work ethic. I can't teach integrity. And so I took this on. I mean, similar to working with Senator Frederick in 2019, I had no idea coming from Corvallis and then McMinnville that there were still police agencies hiring without doing a psychological exam. So I was thrilled to join him on Senate Bill 423 in 2019, which truly, I'd been in the business for 28 years and had no idea there were agencies hiring people without a psychological evaluation. So this situation, as tragic as it is, and as difficult and divisive that it's been, has been for me a great opportunity to actually raise the standard on a profession that I devoted most of my life to. And I know that it's difficult. I feel blessed to have been a part of it, and I hope to be able to continue to be a part of it. But the character of the people we hire, and then providing ongoing wellness training, dealing with the vicarious trauma that our first line, emergency responders deal with, is critical, because I've watched good men and women get hired on and then through the job no longer really are suitable for the job. And it's hard to, it's difficult to encourage them to move along. So when we're talking about House Bill 2930, which is, I think most of you are aware of it, dealing with essentially removing conduct and discipline of police officers from collective bargaining. And instead of being a bargaining tool, and I've been on the bargaining at the table on both sides, both as a Teamster working in Corvallis and then as a manager, as a police chief, I used to sit at the table as well. Knowing how that works, where you're always in this mandatory subject versus permissive subjects, and sometimes you allow permissive subjects to get in so that you can deal with the financial constraints that you have and to come to an agreement. I don't believe that that's the arena for what our society expects as far as conduct and appropriate conduct from police officers. So I pushed really hard, and I know that League of Oregon Cities had a lot of input. Chiefs and sheriffs had a lot of input into this bill. People are worried. I understand that, but I've heard the worry a long time. I've heard some rumors about who's going to want to be a police officer when they don't have direct, when the conduct and the discipline is the purview of a commission. And just all transparency, I'm part of that commission. But I believe a society and a community expectation shouldn't be bargained. And correct behavior is correct behavior. Back to my point is I remember when we did PERS reform and we got rid of tier 1, and everybody said nobody's going to want to be a public employee. And then we got rid of tier 2, and I heard nobody's going to want to be a public employee. That's not what happened. We will have men and women step up to be police officers, and this will allow us to ensure that those few individuals that do step out of line, we have a standard that's statewide. I absolutely believe that this is a minority of police officers that this will impact. Most men and women that I worked with in my career are very capable, very honorable, and they make the best decisions they can. I do believe that there are some police officers out there that should no longer be police officers and maybe should have never been police officers. And so that's why I'm really focused on the character of who we hire, the quality of our training. House Bill 2936, providing some framework as to what a background investigation should look like. I also found out, and a surprise, that not every agency was doing thorough background investigations. Those are probably the same agencies that weren't doing any psychological evaluations. So, now it's mandatory. You need to do a background check, and it needs to fit in the guidelines that are required from the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. Little things in that bill in 2936 that give the ability for employers to look at social media. It's crazy that we do a background check. I used to say that when I hired a background investigator, or I had an internal investigator doing a background, I knew what brand diapers you wore. We talk to everybody, and this is not just checking references. This is going 3 or 4 people deep and looking at backgrounds. it makes no sense why we wouldn't be able to take a look at somebody's social media and how they behave in public and how they interact with people to determine whether or not they're qualified to be a police officer. So that's something that 2930 dealt with. So that was kind of my push. Just a little insight into this last session. I want to make the point that in spite of everything else that was going on, police and criminal justice reform bills were the one part of this legislative session that was collaborative and that was engaging, and we listened. And I say that with this backdrop. In the House, we started off with a representative resigning to avoid being expelled. And then we ended up in the middle of the session with a representative stepping down, voluntarily giving up his chair position because of allegations. And then we ended the session with another representative actually being expelled. So there was this underlying tension throughout the House of Representatives for the whole session. But I can tell you that my chair in the House Judiciary Committee, Janelle Bynum, and I were able to work well enough together, and with the stakeholders, I have to tell you, with LOC, AOC, the chiefs, the sheriffs, police unions, DAs, judicial department, everybody having and participating. There were actually news outlets from the East Coast wanting to know how the African-American woman and the white retired cop were working so well together to get these things passed. And that's not to forget the work done in the Senate by all of our senators. But this is something, I say that simply because we recognize this is an issue. We're tired of dealing with the same issue over and over and over. We need to make headway. There was a window of opportunity, and I think it's still open. We can't miss the opportunity to continue to improve how we serve and treat the citizens of our state. So with that, I've probably rambled on long enough. I could talk for a long time, but I will turn that over. You're muted, Scott.
I'm going to get one of Senator Frederick's mugs. Before I turn it over to Director Granderson, I'm just going to interject briefly that what happened in Oregon didn't happen everywhere. Matter of fact, it didn't happen in most parts of the country, even though the feeling and the desire for reform, I think, on the part of the public was largely nationwide. Is that what was accomplished here, to my knowledge, was not replicated anywhere else. So that is a testament to the cooperation that Representative Noble so eloquently stated. And with that, I will turn this over now to Director Granderson, sort of, so folks can get an idea of where we are with implementation to these great reforms. And then we'll take questions, which you're welcome to put in the chat.
User error. Can you hear me now? Scott, I want to add to what you just said before I get into the specifics on these wonderful bills. I was at a conference last night, and that conference focused on what have we learned 1 year after the death of, or the murder of George Floyd. And before I joined that, I did a little research, and the data indicates that even after a year, the numbers of police violence continues in the same trend as years prior to. And which was shocking to me with respect to that data. And the question is, what have we learned? And I think the numbers will demonstrate we still need some learning going on here, and we still need some, a push in the right direction. But what was also interesting in this analysis, it listed states who had a decrease in that type of violence, and actually Oregon had a decrease. And what was also interesting, the question I proposed was, or is is that a part of the legislation that has been brought forth? And I would have to conclude that yes, because as you just indicated, Scott, not all states are necessarily going in that direction in terms of demanding reform. And I felt that that was a really interesting data and conversation with the community. And also, let me add to this, it was really interesting and wonderful to see young people involved in the discussion and presentation in terms of how these events affect them, not only socially, but also with respect to their emotions. And I also want to lean on and borrow from Senator Frederick with respect to his experiences. Well, my experience has also been similar. And that is the notions of profiling, even as I became the director here at DPPST. And I have some good stories and I have some bad stories. The good story is having a citizen call the police on me because I'm sitting on a corner having a cigar assuming that I was casing the place to rob it. But here's what's also powerful. The officer that answered the call was professional. That officer utilized the training that he received in terms of de-escalation, procedural policing. And we engaged in a 1-hour conversation that had nothing to do with why he was here. As the person who called the police on the second floor was listening and looking down on us, probably assuming that something bad was about to happen. And after a while, I let him know, hey, Director of DPPST, I'm proud of you. You did everything that you were trained to do. This is what needs to get out. And this is what needs to continue. And the other piece of it is supporting law enforcement who try to do the right thing and at the same time deal with the law enforcement who refuse to do the right thing. And a piece of that, and the vast majority of that, I think it was mentioned, we can't control individuals' character. I believe in the face of that, we can force accountability. Yeah, and that is a foundation for many of these bills. And I want to also respond to what I consider one of the most powerful pieces of bills that came out of the Oregon Legislature. And that bill is 2929. 2929 in many ways forces a change in culture, because no longer can law enforcement just stand idly by. We all saw that video of Chauvin putting his knee on that man's neck while other officers did nothing. A duty to intervene and a duty to report. And I can report to the committee right now that we already have that particular form already set up on DPPST's website for that purpose. And I think that I know that is a good movement in the right direction. And we acted on that very quickly because that's a powerful thing for us. Also, with respect to 2930, which is that commission, we are in the preliminary stages. We will be engaging our representatives who are part of that commission, including Senator Noble. We have met with DOJ on at least three different occasions, and we have some questions for Senator Noble with respect to that particular bill and helping us getting that done. With respect to 2936, we've met at least 3 working groups, and we're coming up with some really interesting and relevant recommendations with respect to making uniform background investigations, questionnaires, so forth. For example, Senator Noble hit right on the head. Why isn't this uniform? For example, one of the things that I spoke about at one of the work groups is one of the most valuable things that we can address when doing backgrounds is not just the references of law enforcement officers, because we can assume that if they're making references, that those are quote unquote positive data for that particular person. But what about community interviews of neighbors? Why is that powerful? For example, neighbors hear things. Let's assume that you may have a domestic issue. And now oftentimes the wives report their husbands in terms of domestic issues, but the neighbors may hear something. They may know something. And that's one of the things that that I spoke about in terms of my personal recommendation, that that's a valuable tool, and was surprised to see or hear that that's not in there. Okay, in terms of the left and right neighbors or community canvas. With respect to, I think those are basically the three that we're looking at. But what supplements all of those is the number of bills that came out of the Oregon Legislature, which I believe is leading the, or part of the leading of the nation. And in many ways, also leading the federal government, because as we were discussing in our green room, I mean, we've yet to see even federal anti-lynching laws, but here we have Oregon with these bills that address it at our level for our constituency. With respect to DPSST itself, one of the things that I did when I first came here as the director was to realize that DPSST hadn't had a strategic plan redeveloped in 11 years. So the first thing I did was, okay, well, things have obviously changed. And we just went off campus and we came up with our strategic plan and DPSST's core values. And part of that core values, which was number one, is to promote diversity. Diversity solves a lot of issues. It addresses issues that need to be addressed. There were levels of pushback, but that's okay. That's the purpose of having debate and conversation, so that we can say why this is a good thing. And that's all I need to say about that coming on board. But I am proud of our legislature representatives and our senators for these number of bills. DPSST will, with a strong heart, push forward and make into reality not only those three, but all the other bills and responsibilities that has been provided to us. That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much to all three. We had some questions come in the chat, and I'm going to synthesize one of those as it relates to accreditation. The question was how many agencies are accredited in Oregon, and last count I had was 25% of the police departments in Oregon, police agencies, so sheriffs and police, and plus the state agencies are accredited. But I think the gist of the question was, what's the benefit of accreditation? And so maybe I will send that to whoever wants to take it first.
I'm happy to talk on that one. And from the standpoint of working in Corvallis, that is nationally accredited through CALEA, and was their accreditation manager for a while, and then became an assessor for CALEA and traveled around the United States assessing other agencies. The benefit really is, and then my agency in McMinnville was also accredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. But we have institutions of higher education become accredited so that we know that their teaching and their standards are best practice. We have healthcare facilities that are accredited for the same reason, so that we have some assurance that they are following best practice within the industry. And what accreditation for law enforcement agencies does is a similar, in that it's not a silver bullet, but it's something to help be on the right path to ensure that policies are reviewed on a regular basis in a timely manner. As the director mentioned, strategic plans aren't created, sat on the shelf for 11 years and nothing, and nothing new created. It's a continual improvement of the agency to ensure that as things change, as laws change, as case law changes, as new, from going from, as the senator mentioned, from community policing and broken windows to CompStat and other types of policing theories and types of operations, that we're staying abreast of what's best practice. Also with training, but it's not just putting that in place. You have to show that you're doing it. And when I said I traveled around the United States, I went to agencies and had to observe for a week and then look at proofs that they actually were following the policies that they had in place. Now, again, there are some agencies that are accredited that have some problems. And there are some good agencies out there that aren't accredited. But House Bill 2162, which brings in accreditation and requires the accreditation for agencies with 35 or more officers, is a step in the right direction to start the process again of credibility, best practice, and a continual looking at your operation to ensure that you're meeting the community expectations and that you're providing your officers with the best opportunity for success. I don't mind saying that McMinnville was less than 35 officers when I got there. This is very capable, very easy to do. Well, I can't say easy. It's very possible and should be done with all police agencies. And I hope that we can require that of all agencies as we move forward. There's a cost. I was a full-time job in the city of Corvallis when we had, the city of 45,000 when I left. It does cost, but I don't think you can actually have an agency today. If you can't afford the cost, then maybe you should rethink whether or not you have a police agency. I guess I'd just put it that way. It may be a passion of mine. You may have picked up on that.
Definitely a passion, and just want to give you an update on the 2162. The Board of Public Safety Standards and Training will review the proposed rule changed this month, October 28th, with an implementation effective November 1st, 2021. Just to let you know, Senator.
And Senator Frederick, do you have any thoughts on how, when you see accredited on a car, or does that cause you to form an opinion? Or
only I think it speaks to the idea that there's an expectation that we will have a sort of a standard across the state, that whenever you encounter someone who has any kind of public safety, law enforcement image or uniform or car or whatever, that there's a standard of practice that we're going to see from that particular person. And the accreditation helps encourage that. I doubt if anyone or very many people look to see whether there's accreditation. I also, though, it is funny, not funny, but it is curious. I think, Scott, you remember when we first looked at the psychological evaluation thing, many of the sheriffs and the police chiefs assumed, because they were often in large agencies, that everyone did that. And then we discovered that no, that wasn't the case. They were, in fact, I think there was almost an attempt to put that forward as one of the arguments, and then people backed off on that because they recognized that, in fact, we did not have that consistency across the state. And so this is the kind of thing, the accreditation helps to bring that. Again, it really helps to give a sense of confidence that you are going to be greeted working with a professional no matter what. And so that's the idea behind the accreditation overall. In hospitals and psychologists and teachers, all the accreditation attempts to try to provide that kind of a confidence.
And I would just also add, League of Oregon Cities and City County Insurance Services have been advocating for accreditation and encouraging that for some time. And Dave Nelson at CIS I believe is the lead on that. And he I believe was also an examiner for a time for one of the accreditation agencies, and can certainly help agencies as they go through this process. And it may be something you want to consider, even if you're not above, if you're at below 35 sworn employees as well. I've heard some comments. It improves officer morale as well.
Examples of small agencies, 4 officers that's accredited would be the city of Carlton. They do it with 4 officers. It's very possible, very able to be done. I had another thought that it's gone now, so I will mute.
And we do have a question in the chat about the differences between the 2 accreditation agencies. There's the Oregon Accreditation Alliance and then CALEA. Is there a...
CALEA is a national body. And so their standards will apply broadly to essentially all states and all systems within policing. Not all of the standards apply as you go through the process of CALEA, depending on where you're located. Where the Oregon Accreditation Alliance is in the state of Oregon. It's input with chiefs and sheriffs. It also deals with 911. The state of Washington has an accrediting body as well called WASPIC. And at one time, Beaverton was accredited by the Washington agency. I think Beaverton may be CALEA now as well. I think one of the things that we did is we asked DPPST to determine which one of these accrediting bodies or multiple bodies is actually qualified to be accredited. So there's some oversight by the state as to which bodies are approved to be accredited with. Right now, the L3 that I mentioned, from my perspective, are quality organizations.
Terrific.
Senator, did you get a response to that question?
I'm just pleased. I don't know the differences necessarily. That's not been part of my effort. I've just relied on the idea that we have professionals taking a look at what they think professionals should be doing. And looking at it, and that's been helpful. We need to make sure that they also have a community connection there as well, and that I hope that's part of the evaluation. One of the concerns that I've had, and I'll put it very simply, we've had people suggest that some of the police agencies have acted, especially the larger agencies, have acted more like occupying forces rather than community supporters, and those are the large agencies that are accredited. So that's a concern. That's one of the aspects I think needs to be taken into account, both locally or statewide as well as nationally.
And if I may add to that, when we look at these 3 pillars, whether it's accreditation, the standardization of background investigation and psychological assessments, these things address one major issue in my view, and that is we're dealing with individuals who have a power over life and death, power to deny people their constitutional right of movement or being detained, and the American people, not just Oregon, the American people, when given those powers representing the American people, they want accountability. And they want that assessment as to who will be wearing that badge and who will have that power over life and death. So it's very important, at least from my venue, when let's look at the psychological analysis. Number one, let me add that piece of that bill also applies, is for all public safety, not just law enforcement. That's another piece, because the dispatchers have a tremendous amount of power too in saying, hey, this person has a gun, or no, the person doesn't have a gun. So that's very integral too. From the social media perspective, we want to know, what people's attitudes are. before they get to DPSST. We want to know if they have some, blatant forward attitudes towards or bias towards the people who they will be charged to serve or deny service in that respect. So these bills, are very pertinent, very powerful. One of the things that I am doing to make sure that DPSST is maintaining the spirit of these bills, because things, I've been in organizations where, people tend to haphazardly apply things. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm meeting with as many legislators to give them updates on where we are with these bills, to make sure that every spirit of it is being appropriately applied as directed. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
So I see a hand up in the group. Mayor Johnson, I apologize if you've been waiting for a while. If you can unmute, or if someone can unmute him, that would be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So the question I have is, my department, or the City of Albany's department, police department, is certified CALIA, and we maintain that certification at a high standard on annually. My question is would we have to do the other accreditation as well, or will this suffice with the new bill, the House bill?
I'd be happy to talk about at least intent from my perspective, since I was pushing the bill. And that would be, we didn't designate any specific accrediting body.
Okay.
Just like in higher ed, there are different accrediting bodies where you are across the country. We place that in the hands of DPSST to determine and essentially create a list that would be appropriate, whether it's CALIA, OAA, or others. Just looking to the future, there may be other bodies that develop. There may be some that are in existence now that no longer. So it's trying to allow DPSST to determine which accrediting bodies would suffice for the statewide accreditation. And so, Albany could be CALIA, or McMinnville could stay Oregon Accreditation Alliance, and they both would meet the requirements of the law.
Okay, that would be very helpful to get that list as soon as possible, because it comes at great expense to the City of Albany, and I believe Corvallis as well. So it'd be nice to know when that list is published and get it out to the police chiefs as soon as possible.
I'm pretty sure that's, I believe I heard Director Granderson talk about that's later on in the month, where they're going to start meeting on that bill and working that, but I don't want to speak for him.
Director Granderson, I'd love to know, when that list is published or when those discussions are happening.
The list out.
Yeah, the ones that DPSST, I believe, will accept as far as being accredited or certified police departments.
Yes, I will get that list up and out. Let me speak with my criminal justice administrator on those specifics. But that list.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I would point folks to the chat if Diana Moffett, who I know to be an excellent labor relations attorney, is conducting a training on House Bill 2930 for the Oregon Employment Relations, the Oregon Public Employers Labor Relations Association coming up. And if you're a city attorney on the call, please take advantage of that, or bring this up to your council as well to ensure. I think the changes in that bill as it relates to burden of proof, just cause standards have changed significantly in a way that is significantly towards the public benefit. but they will require some adjustment on the part of your council and how you undertake or go through the arbitration process with an officer. And the league will also be sponsoring in the near term some seminars on some of these bills for the practitioners in the group as to assist with implementation as well. So I think we're coming up close on time, and I'm seeing the chat. If Christy or Julie, if you're seeing other hands up, I can't see them. So if you wouldn't mind directing them, that would be great.
Yeah, this is Julie. There is a hand up from Councilor Barker. You want to unmute
Okay.
yourself?
Thank you, Councilor Barker.
Thank you so much. Senator Lou, Director Granderson, and Mr. Noble, your reports have been fantastic. I have been wondering for the last 20, 30 years why psychological profiles have not been done. I lived in a very small community in Ohio, and the family was predominantly police oriented, and there was a domestic dispute between the son of the police chief and his wife, the son's wife. He pumped 26 bullets in her. My first question was, where was the psychological profile? Naturally, of course, he got a 2-year slap on the wrist because of insanity, the number of bullets shot. Speaking of profiling, I myself was profiled. One, when I first moved to Oregon because of my car. Bright yellow, California plates. I-5 corridor, okay? I was a drug runner in their mind. I had guns pulled on me. Naturally, of course, I got a potty mouth. I admit that. I also filed a complaint, impacted as it was. But the main reason why I raised my hand was based upon the 3 accreditation programs. Are they similar, or are there any minute, subtle differences that would make a difference in the training?
I would have to write off Senator Noble assessment with respect to the accreditation. One is more national, the other is state. And there may be some extreme similarities and some nuances. And also, let me just bring to the attention that Steve Wright has provided a HTTP with respect to those 2 accredited, or what agencies are accredited, so forth and so on. I have to admit, I've not examined in depth the nuances and differences, and I really can't address that, those specifics. Perhaps, Senator Noble, you can enlighten us.
Most of the critical standards, actually all the critical standards, are the same. For instance, if you are CLIA accredited, you are qualified then to apply for Oregon Accreditation Alliance, and they take that accreditation as well. What you have, Oregon Accreditation Alliance may have some issues that are specific to Oregon statute, where the national body will say must comply with Oregon statutes, or your local state legislative OAA may become more specific in their requirements for compliance, and that's the Washington program is similar. I know that, like I said, we've had agencies in Oregon accredited from a Washington group. We currently have agencies in Alaska who are accredited by the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. So there is a lot of crossover. And really part of it comes down to money. The city manager of Albany mentioned the cost. CLIA accreditation is much more expensive, where the local accrediting body tries to be much more flexible with the cost. So that's kind of the, like I said, I was CLIA accredited in Corvallis. I had full confidence in the Oregon Accreditation Alliance, even as a CLIA assessor. So we became accredited in McMinnville with the Oregon Accreditation Alliance.
While I appreciate the uniformity of CLIA and OAA, there's the question of meet, beat, or exceed federal thresholds without creating a jurisdictional conflict, of course. So with that in mind, I was kind of curious if the legislature had discussed any of that. Did that question make sense?
It made sense. I again will sort of defer to Representative Noble because there was significantly more discussion within his group than we had, and I'm not in the Judiciary Committee for the Senate, so I didn't really have much of that discussion. But that's one of the issues, and I think I think that's probably one of the issues that the director is probably going to be looking at in their assessment coming up here shortly.
Yeah, quite honestly, the largest obstacle was really to get accreditation into a statute, and getting buy-off, which is why you have population or agency size thresholds there. I would like to see it statewide, regardless of size of agency, but that's something we had to negotiate to ensure that we could, at least, I guess, for lack of a better terminology, get our foot in the door. So as we know more, and as DPPST does their analysis of which agencies are best suited from a state perspective, then I think we'll get more into those realms. I know that all the accrediting bodies absolutely take into effect federal issues, requirements, case law. That seems to be the overall driver. For example, until recently, Oregon's use of force statute, well, for my entire career, was out of compliance with federal case law. So I never learned Oregon use of force. I learned based on case law and some landmark cases that the Supreme Court decided years ago. So part of that is a continual improvement, both at the agency, in the legislature, statute, and I think we've just set this on Director Granderson's lap.
Thank you very much. It will be taken care of. Give us more. Give us more. You can never have too much on this topic.
Well, on that note, I guess I will close with a quick question, and maybe it's not fair because I'm looking at the clock now, but what should we expect in February on this? I understand there'll be someone's got, Representative Bynum has a technical fix bill that is being introduced. Should we be looking for big changes in February as well?
Well, first of all, you need to recognize that it's only a 5-week session in February. So basically things have to be done within 10 days in order for them to move along into the full session, to the other chamber. So anything that's done will likely be something that can be explained and worked on literally before the session begins, so that we can get some things accomplished. I know that there'll be some discussion about the issues related to how police pull people over and for what. We had that discussion in the last session, but it didn't get the kind of discussion that a lot of us wanted to see. So we'll see some of that take place, and so I imagine likely some kind of impact on that particular issue. Can you just pull people over for whatever reason, or just an adjustment of those kinds of issues? And I imagine that there'll be a few others, but it will be a small number. We only have, each one of us has 2 bills that we can introduce, and there are 3 bills that are available for the committees to introduce. So it'll be a small number. We have a short time, and we have to get things done relatively quickly. So that's part of what will be taking place.
Yeah, and I would agree. The Senator is talking about what was proposed as House Bill 2002 in the last session. And I know that Representative Bynum and I presented to the Oregon Judicial Conference Tuesday, and that was a topic that came up. And in the value of pretext stops in the proper use and the negative abuses of pretext stops, and quite to just be frank, the creativity of bad cops, and ensuring that we don't set up some false hope by, there's over 1,000 reasons to stop a car that are legal, and we need to be really careful that we don't set up a false hope of what the bill will do, regardless of where you land on the bill. The other one is, I know Portland's had some concerns that have spilled over on House Bill 2928. And Scott, you and I have talked about that. I know there's a meeting next week with a lot of stakeholders to ensure that the language is clear enough to meet the intent of the legislature, because what's interpreted in Portland, I think, is different on what the bill that I believed I was voting on. So I know that is at the top of our list too, which is within the spirit of the short session to provide any corrections or fixes in the legislation from the long session.
If I can add to that, and I think it's very important that we mention an additional bill that's out there dealing with private security and as an industry in terms of setting certain standards for that piece of it. And I think we would be remiss not to, make people aware that that's something that's being addressed as well.
Good point. Thank you.
All right, we are a little bit past time, but I'm seeing the comments, and we're very grateful for your time, Senator, Representative, and Director. This has been a great conversation. I don't think it'll be the last time we ask you to come and speak with us again. And so with that, I will turn this back over to Julie to talk about the next event on the calendar. And please enjoy your weekends with our gratitude panel, our panelists.
Thank you for inviting. Take care.